Thanks, Chris. Thank you. It's always good fun in the morning commute. Thank you, and thanks to everybody. Look, today, as you say, everybody's starting getting back to work, and what I thought I'd do today is just start to think about the things you need to think about as a business owner around HR and all the pitfalls and things that you might come across when you're dealing with people. Now, from my point of view, Sandra Connington HR, I tried to keep the name simple so that I'd never forgot my business name, because if I did, then I'd forget my own name. So tried to keep it fairly simple. So from an HR point of view, what do? Well, we just provide HR support and services to organisations, small organisations and schools. And it's about making sure that our key objective is just to keep you guys on the right side of employment legislation. And the way we work is we become your HR department, although we're not sitting in your office, we're a remote organisation, but we just become your HR department. We take away all your people worries, we take away all your issues, we deal with them, we help you build an outstanding team. And what you'll find with Linda and I especially, we just keep it fairly basic in the language. We're not one of these HR people that's all about legal speak, and we keep it fairly simple so that you understand it and we can explain it as simply as we possibly can. So that's the way we operate. Here's the team. So there's me, there's Linda that's on the call today. Linda heads up my small business team. So she looks after everybody that's a small business. In other words, if you're not a school, you deal with Linda. I've got Sujata, who's now coming on board to look after all my schools. So I've got a number of schools in London that I work with. And I've also got Adele, Jacinta and Yolanda, who are also HR consultants that work with us on an independent basis as and when we get a bit busy. And they're full tilt at the moment because we're really busy. And we've also got Onika, who supports Linda and the team from an HR support administrator, and she's also my PA and does all my grunge stuff that I don't want to do. She's much quicker at typing than I am. I've also got Nessie, and despite her name, she's not Scottish. She's an occupational health nurse. So we've got an occupational health nurse on board as well, and she helps me and the team and you as a business work with people that have maybe got long-term sick, or you hear this thing around long COVID at the moment. So she helps you in the business work how we can support these people with long COVID or long-term sickness ailments, and she comes into your business and helps you with that. And we also have a legal team that sits in the background in all of this, and it's Palmer Solicitors over at Basildon. So we've got a legal team on board as well. So we're a fairly small organisation, but with a big heart and willing to help any way we possibly can. So what is HR? Well, that's HR, really. That's everything we do. And this is what we call the employee life cycle. And this is the journey that any employee that you take into your business goes round. Everything from recruitment and selection. So Chris, if you're needing some help, Linda's your person that can help you with that. So we can help you with, advertising, writing job descriptions. We supply the contracts. We help you with probationary period management. We help you with poor performance and good performance. We help you with disciplinaries. So everything, helping you with things like benchmarking of salaries. But we also, you'll see a little green blob over at the left called exit management. And we were talking earlier about how to help people maybe exit the business. So we've got redundancies, settlement agreements. We help you with all of that. So anything that touches an individual in an organisation, Linda and the team and I, we can help you manage that incident or that issue or that problem or that question through what we call the employee life cycle. So there's all the things. I'm not going to go through all of that because it would just be a bit tedious, but it's about just so that you guys can see all the things that we do as an HR team. But what I thought I would do is every day Linda and I and the team are asked some questions, and they're usually the same questions day in, day out. And what I thought I'd do is I'd pull out some of those frequently asked questions and give you some of the answers, because it might be that you've got some of these questions burning in your own business at the moment. So let's deal with some of them as we go along. So what policies do I need to have? That's the big question we're always here, and it's the policies we can support you with. So it's things like disciplinary, capability, grievance. We talked earlier about having family-friendly policies. So things like home working is a big policy at the moment we're doing, and we're working with organisations what that might look like for them. And all the policies that we supply are all legal checked, and they also tailored to you as a business. So they're not just off the shelf policies, they're for you as an organisation. So there's lots of different policies that you need to think about. Can I still use furlough is a big question at the moment. Yes, you can. So if you're using furlough, still use it. You still get up to 80% wages for your employees, but you now as an employer as of the 1st of July have to make a 10% contribution. So the government only pays 70% now, instead of the 80 that we had up until the 30th of June. So yeah, and remember, while they're on furlough, they're still accruing holiday. So you need to remember that as well. But you can, when they're on furlough, ask them to take holiday, but you have to then pay them 100% of their salary if you're doing that. What measures should I think about in the workplace? And it's about making sure that you have reasonable support and measures in your organisation, whether it's been asking people to wear masks or shields or the 2-metre distancing and regular cleaning in the office, whether it's staggering your rotas for coming in, leaving, who works at home, who works in the organisation, in the office. It's just thinking a bit wider on how you manage a business through this time. And the big thing I'm talking to all employers about this now is the bottom point there is talk to staff now about their intentions of going abroad. We've got the red, amber, greens going on at the moment, and it's who can travel, who can't travel, why you should travel. And when you go there, is there self-isolation? When you come back, is there self-isolation? And it's about getting people to start to think, are they going to get back from their holidays and do their period of isolation and be able to come back to work at the day they're supposed to be back at work? Because there might be an element that you say, well, I'm sorry, you were supposed to be back on the 1st of September. And they say, oh, I'm isolating. That period could be classed as unpaid leave. So just start talking to your employees now about what that might look like, who's intending to go abroad, and what their arrangements are for self-isolation when they come back. So that's a real big important point at the moment for employers to think about. So I have a small company. Do I have to follow processes when I just want to employ my friend? Everybody should be following processes, regardless of whether it's your friend or whether it's your family. Make sure everybody's treated fairly when you're recruiting someone. When we're looking at CVs, I had a client the other day saying, we only employ women over 55, Sandra, because they're less likely to get pregnant, aren't they? And you go, really? Or I work in a construction company, women have no place in there. Really? So think really clearly about some of the personal biases you might have in your thinking when you're recruiting people. It's about being fair, it's about being equitable across the piece, and also starting to think about that last point. Did you know that even though you don't employ someone, they could still take you to an employment tribunal for discrimination? So just bear that in mind. Make sure that when you're asking questions in an interview, every single person is asked the same questions. Keeps it fair. Bit around Brexit as well, just thinking about when you are recruiting someone, check that they actually have the right to work in the UK. So checking things like whether it's passports, visas, have they actually got the right to settle in the UK? So there's all of that legislation. I could bore you for hours on that, but I'm not going to do that. But it's just something that you need to think about when you're employing someone. Do they actually have the right to work in the UK? And if they haven't already got their settled status, they could, at some point after the 1st of July, be deported. And you as an organisation could be fined heavily for employing an illegal worker. So just be really careful when you're employing someone. Do your right to work checks. If you need help with that, let us know, and we can help you with what that actually looks like. Onboarding, as I call it. I only employ family and friends, get this a lot. So do I need a contract for them? Yes, you do. Regardless of whether it's your mother, your father, your brother, your sister, or whoever, everybody is entitled to a contract on the day they start, not 12 weeks later, on the day they start, because it's got to lay out the terms and conditions of their employment, what they're going to get paid, when they're going to pay it. And also it's thinking about what they're paid. You have to pay everyone at least the national minimum wage. So just thinking about that. Also, create a job description. At least then people will know what's expected of them. You can hold them to account against that job description. Be really clear what the job is and what you expect them to do. Then you can manage them, especially in the probationary period. But don't be afraid to have those difficult conversations. If they're not performing, tell them. Don't hide it. Don't think it's easier to have a nice conversation, because it only becomes trouble later on. Can I give someone a verbal warning? No. Verbal warnings, we're asked this every day almost. Can I just give someone a verbal warning? No. Verbal warnings don't actually exist as a warning type in ACAS anymore. Okay, doesn't exist. So just be careful when you're managing someone's performance. If they're having a problem, sit them down, have the conversation, set goals, set targets for improvement and monitor it through that. But verbal warnings do not exist anymore. So can I just give them a letter and stick a letter in the file then if I'm giving them a written warning? Nope, can't do that either. There's a lot of no's in HR, isn't there? It's about making sure that you follow the process and follow your own policy, and at very least follow the ACAS guidelines. You have to carry out an investigation. You have to invite them to a hearing. You must give them right to be represented. You have to hold the hearing and then you give them the letter, which goes on their file. It's not just a case of, here's a letter and I've just put it in your file. It doesn't work like that anymore. Here's a question for you. How many days are employees legally allowed to have off sick every year? None. The entitlement is to be paid for sickness leave, not to have sickness leave. And people get that confused, and people also think they're entitled to sickness leave, which is added on to their holiday entitlement. No, it's not. And remember, SSP is £96.35 a week, and the first 3 days of SSP is unqualified. Okay, so you don't get paid for the first 3 days. And remember, self-certification is 7 days, and that includes weekends. And then after that, they've got to have a doctor's certificate. Right, if someone who's in the business, we had this the other day, can I just get rid of them? They're always off sick. Can I just get rid of them? No, you can't do that, because that's unfair dismissal. Under the Equalities Act, there's a whole raft of Equality and Disability and Discrimination Act that applies here, and you've got to be really careful when you're dismissing someone if they have been off sick, because they could qualify as a disabled person. Although it may not be one of the protected characteristics, if they've had an illness for over 12 months, they could still be classed as disabled. So be really careful when you're managing someone's sickness, but have the conversation, ask them what it's like, how they're feeling, when they're likely to be back, what treatment they're going on. You can ask them those sorts of questions. Don't be afraid to ask the questions you need to know as an employer. I've got someone who's just lazy and rubbish at his job. Like when he comes on site, Sandra, can I just tell him to pick up his tools and go? No, you've got to have a policy for managing poor performance. You can't just sack them. Despite popular belief, you can't just sack them if they've got less than 1 year's service. There's a lot of people go, well, he's only been with us for 6 months, we can just sack him, can't we? No, you can't do that. They've got to have a fair policy for managing poor performance, setting targets, continually rechecking their targets, telling them where they're going wrong, giving them training, giving them support. It's not about just hire and fire, because unfair dismissal could apply even though they've got less than 1 year's service. A lot of redundancy going on at the moment, and I think we were talking about this earlier. And we're doing a lot of restructures and a lot of redundancies at the moment across both elements of the business, whether it's small businesses or schools just now. You've got to have a legitimate reason for redundancy. You can't just pick the person that you want to make redundant. There's a process around how people are selected. It's got to be fair, and it's got to be that if there are people in that organisation all doing similar works, it's called a job pool, and they all have to be treated the same. So it's not about you going, you're out. It doesn't work like that. And then you also have to do a period of consultation. We always do 2 weeks if you've got less than 20 members of staff. Good practice says it should be up to 2 weeks. 30 days if you've got more than 20 people made redundant, and 90 days if you've got more than 90. So it's about making sure you follow the rules. There's letters that you need to send, periods of time that you need to go through. They have to be paid their notice, and they have to be paid any holiday pay that's owing. But redundancy pay only applies if you've got 2 or more years service. So you don't pay them redundancy if they've got less than 2 years service, but you certainly have to still follow the process. So don't try and circumnavigate any of this. It's about just asking for help, and we can help you do that. Can I just sack someone? No, there are 5 key points there for dismissing someone. And we would always say to you, we'll help you through that, whether it's misconduct, capability, redundancy, what we call statutory legality or breach of statutory restriction. And that can be something like, say, for example, someone loses their driving license and their job is actually a driver. We can dismiss for that reason because they could no longer do their job. We would look at possibly finding them another job if your organisation was big enough. But it's about making sure that when someone is being dismissed, you do it in the proper way, in the proper timescale, with all the proper procedures to keep you out of tribunal. If not, if you're in tribunal, there's a whole heap of nonsense goes on around there. It's really painful, it's really expensive. So let's not get there. But we can help you with all of that as and when you need it, and hopefully we never have to see you in tribunal. So making sure you just fit with the policies that you actually have. That's the whistle stop tour to some of the frequently asked questions, Chris. What I want to do is just say, does anybody have any questions for Linda and I? We'd be happy to answer any of them.
So I've got a couple to start off with. I suppose one of the areas that's sort of more prominent at the minute is people looking at their flexible working arrangements, particularly sort of people doing 2 days a week in the office and, you know, working from home and all of that sort of good stuff. If somebody hasn't got a flexible working policy in place, what do they need to do? What's the steps they need to take to make sure that it works both for the employees but also for the business?
That's the real point there, Chris. Yeah. You have under ACAS, you know, you don't have to have an actual policy. We can help you with a policy for your organisation, but you can follow the ACAS rules, and it's really clear. It's about asking the person to apply for flexible working. There's a process they need to, a form they need to fill in, download it from the ACAS website. They fill it in and say, this is what I want, this is what it looks like, and this could be the effect on the business. You need to meet with that person and say to them, explain to me what you're thinking. You then have that sort of two-way conversation that says, well, that might not work for us, but here's something that might work. And you come to hopefully a meeting of minds somewhere in the middle. Once you do that, now you can do one of two things. You can either put it in flexible working in as a trial period to say, well, let's see how it works for a year or 6 months, or you can go straight to a permanent change in your contract, Chris. Then that's it, it's a permanent change. Now, under legislation, people are only allowed to make one application per year for flexible working. So even if you say no, because as a business, you have the right to say no, you only have to consider it, you don't have to accept it, but that's their chance gone for a year. And there are 8 reasons that you can say no to flexible working. It's not just because I don't want to. You have to have at least one of the 8 legal reasons.
And then I suppose the other one was, you know, you talked about that sort of disciplinary process and having a clear process in place. If there's a written warning, what's the next step? You know, has it got to be a number of written warnings before dismissal, or how does it work?
No, it doesn't have to be. You can have first written warning, second written warning, and then dismissal. But depending on what's happened, what the level of misconduct it is, you actually can go straight to what we call gross misconduct, which could result in them being summarily dismissed. In other words, their employment is ended on that day that the hearing takes place. But if it's just a continuing misconduct, continually being late, for example, or continually doing something in the organisation that they shouldn't, you'll have your first written warning, your second written warning, your final and dismissal. So you do take it through a process unless it's gross misconduct. But gross misconduct has to be really clearly defined as to what that might look like.
Great stuff. Anybody else got any other questions? Steve?
Sandra, just obviously with the advent of flexible working, if you take, for example, a business that's historically been based in London and obviously has to pay a certain salary to attract certain individuals, where does the company stand in regards to an employee asking for flexible working, but obviously being on a package that would normally associate with paying a London wage?
Well,
the wages to the wages, the wage.
Can I just add two things to that? Because that came up, you know, I don't know if you were on the last in the circle, Steve, but we actually had that dialogue. So it'll be interesting to hear Sandra's answer, because one of the things that came up is London waiting. You know, is that boost? Does that continue to apply if people are not commuting to town? So
yes.
It does.
Yes, wages are wages. From a contractual point of view, when you hire me on a particular wage, whether it's got London waiting or not London waiting in it. And it's that bit that you have your salary. Your salary is your salary. You cannot reduce anyone's salary just because they're now not coming into London. The salary is contractual. The only way you can reduce someone's salary is if you were going to formal consultation with them. So you would have to consult with them. If they said, no, thank you, I'm not reducing my wage, you can impose it, but that means you would have to dismiss the person and re-employ them on a new contract. That usually means you end up in tribunal with constructive dismissal. So you need to be really, really careful. So sadly, Steve, their salary is their salary, and that's what they have, and that's what they have to keep. But I understand your point, but unfortunately under legislation.
Is this going to be the next kind of avalanche of changes in the industry in the city, where suddenly companies look to kind of dial down on the amount of they're paying salaries because they've got the office space that's not being utilised, they've got the salaries that are normally consummate with a London wage. You just kind of wonder if it's going to happen.
Yeah, because what you then find is the company will then do a restructure, Steve. So then they'll restructure, and through that restructure, they could look at rebanding or repaying or regrading salaries. They could do that. Again, that's a whole heap of trouble, but waiting to happen. But you've got to consult properly with that.
I mean, I suppose
you can't just reduce it, sadly. But yeah, there's an opportunity there for restructuring, possibly.
I mean, taking the HR factor into account, it will be driven by the market as well, right? You know, it will be driven by what people are, you know, will accept or won't accept. But
yeah, but the thing is, you know, I guess the thing is, you might have somebody employed on, I don't know, 60,000 or whatever, and they're doing a job. The next time you recruit to that job, you don't have to recruit to that salary, because the next time could be a work-based salary. So you could then say, well, the next person I recruit to that job is going to be work-based, so I'll recruit it at, say, 50,000, for example. Yeah. So you can do it that way, but it's really different. You can't take somebody's salary away from them.
Okay, one final question. Has anybody got another question? No, I don't think.
Yeah, I have, if that's okay.
Yeah, go for it.
No, I have.
Go for it.
How has your business been affected by the Kickstart scheme?
Well, I'm doing a lot of Kickstart recruitment, funny enough, in education. Education has really gone for the Kickstart scheme. Not so much small businesses, Simon. They haven't really taken it up, but I've certainly seen a lot of schools doing it for bringing people in at that lower level of teaching and then growing them through the Kickstart. That I've got one teaching school that I work with, and they've just recruited 25 new teachers on the Kickstart scheme. So they're about to go through the teacher training through that process, and they then go through the teacher training, and then they can be unleashed onto the world of education. But the Kickstart hasn't really been, as far as I'm aware, the ones that I've been working with haven't really taken it up.
Yeah, I mean, we're actually really seriously consider using it for our next recruit.
Yeah,
I do think it's a decent deal for particularly for small businesses. I don't know if they've done a particularly good job in terms of educating small businesses in terms of
No,
what it's been about.
no,
Amazing.
they haven't,
No.
Chris, definitely
Amazing.
not.
Thank you so much, Sandra
Okay.
and Linda, who was clearly listening and just fact checking everything you were doing, Sandra. I know it's an important job. It's an important job.
She's very good at that. She's very good. Yeah, no, absolutely. Very good at that. Keeping
Good
me on the
stuff.
straight and narrow.